right, exciting. All right, so thank you for attending this afternoon. I know your lives are busy and complex, and so it is wonderful you're able to attend. And I will give a huge shout out to our presenters now and also at the end. Um, so I'm guessing pretty much all of you in this room know that the NSF GRFP program is pretty much the most prestigious graduate STEM graduate fellowship in the country. My standard line is I've been to seminars and colloquia where somebody may have won a major prize senior in their career. I've even heard a Nobel Prize winner introduced that that person won a NSF GRFP fellowship when they were a graduate student. So it's certainly one of those category of awards that stay with you. Not only that, it really helps during your graduate studies, finance your graduate studies. So it's just got massive positives to it. So we're honored today. We have three distinct parts. We have Erin Strickland, who's able to join us at the start of the meeting to talk about writing support. And then we're going to go to Sarah Codd and Abby Richards, who are going to talk about what they've seen from when they review proposals. And then we're going to have a short panel of graduate students who are current holders of NSF GRFPs. And I think we'll take questions pretty much throughout. So if you're just joining us, we're recording this. The way to ask questions is either chat window or by raising your hand by having the participant panel up next to your name, you can raise your hand. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Erin. Erin is amazing, and she is in charge of the graduate portion of the Writing Center. So Erin, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so I am sort of kicking this off to put this in the back of your mind that the Writing Center exists and we're here for you and we want to work with you. But then you're going to dive into all these questions that Sarah and Abby are going to be able to answer that I won't be able to answer. And I want to give you plenty of time to talk to them about those things and get all your questions answered. So I see the Writing Center as being helpful in three kind of stages of the writing. The first is just brainstorming. Once you leave this meeting, you're going to be sort of overwhelmed with all of the things, and you're going to start thinking about what you're going to have to write. And it can sometimes just be hard to think about where to take that. And so at the Writing Center, you can make an appointment with a tutor and just talk about those options. We do have a few limited face-to-face appointments going on right now. Most of them are online, but you can work with your tutor however you are comfortable. So if you are just brainstorming and you want to talk about this, you can ask them if you can call on the phone or if you can video chat or something if you don't have any actual writing to look at. And those brainstorming sessions can be super, super nice just to get out some ideas and start to shape your writing. Then when you actually have something written down, you can bring it back to a tutor and they can tell you their impression of it, what they think, what they're understanding from it, and give you that sort of feedback on how does it read, how does it sound to someone totally outside of your field. Have you been able to express those ideas? And that can be really helpful. And then the third phase is kind of when you're ready for it to be polished up, because it's really high stakes and you want it to be as flawless as possible. So getting as many people's eyes on it then is great. That might be someone in your department, people who have had experience with this fellowship before or who have gotten the fellowship before. So they are really helpful, professors, friends, family members, and when you've tired everyone else out and nobody wants to look at it anymore, the Writing Center is still here for you because we pay them to look at it for you, right? So they're always there. And I think that that's just really nice to have that sort of bounce back of ideas and that feedback on how your writing is coming across. I will share information about this particular fellowship with all of the tutors and let them know what this is. And that way, when you come in and say, hey, I'm working on my NSF fellowship grant, they'll be like, yes, I know what that is. I know what those requirements are and what the restrictions are. And so it won't be a whole new thing, right? They might ask a little bit about it, but I want them to have some background information so that they can be helpful to you. It's such an amazing program. There's so much that goes into it. I just really want to stress how important it is to start early with your writing, to go through lots of phases and allow yourself to have many different, drafts or many different sort of iterations of what your application might look like so that it can be just spot on. The Writing Center, thank you, Craig, for putting the WC Online link in the chat. That is awesome. You can also just Google Montana State Writing Center and our website will come up. Don't do MSU Writing Center because you'll go to Michigan State and that causes all sorts of confusion. But yeah, you can find us online. You can contact me anytime. I'll put my email address in here. I'd be happy to talk with you one-on-one about anything concerning the fellowship and your writing of the fellowship. I think, yeah, I was going to try to keep it brief. Does anyone have questions for me? No? Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Erin, and I have now rechristened you as the amazing Erin.
Great, I love it. Take it.
We're expecting to see that on your tagline when you join the WebEx meetings.
Okay, perfect.
So it is much appreciated, all that you do for graduate students writing. So, and one of the things I should say, as your thesis or dissertation develops, certainly Erin's colleagues can certainly help as that moves forward. Right?
Yes, definitely.
And papers and things like that. All right, so let me turn it over now. Let me introduce Abby Richards and Sarah Codd. Abby is, I always forget the title. Abby, are you head of department is the official title? Head of the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering. And Sarah Codd is professor in mechanical engineering. So I'll turn it over to Abby and to Sarah.
Thanks, Craig. So Abby and I have basically adapted some slides that National Science Foundation put out on this fellowship program. We became interested in this because we reviewed for quite a few years, and we've helped a lot of students write their essays in engineering over the years and supported them in that capacity. And so a lot of our knowledge specifics does come from reviewing engineering applications, so just keep that in mind. If you have mentors that are in different fields that say something counter to what we say because they've reviewed in that field, then you should listen to them because different fields have take on some different traits as well. So, oh, I can't move it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So I'm happy to do the first little bit with some background about the program. Hopefully I can get my slides to move. I know we've got one so far. Let's see. Go.
Kathy, you may need to move it for them or not.
Oh, there we go. I got it to work. All right.
Okay, good.
Magic. We just had to threaten Kathy was going to take over, and that made it work. Okay. So as Sarah mentioned, we're both engineers, so our experience does come from an engineering perspective. We've both served on panels to review these proposals. And I want to give you a little bit of background about the fellowship program goals, because that can help you understand what the National Science Foundation is aiming for when they're supporting graduate students in this way. And essentially what a primary goal is to increase our nation's capacity to do science and engineering. by funding new scientists and engineers who are in graduate school, pursuing research-based master's and doctoral degrees. And underpinning that is a desire to have a diverse workforce. And that is going to be important when you think about your own personal story, because these projects or these fellowships are certainly science-focused, but they're also focused on individuals and an individual person's path to science. And so we'll talk about that when we get into some of the nuts and bolts about the program there. So do you want to take over this part, Sarah? I think we chatted about you doing the first part and then me doing the second. Or I can continue. Okay, I'm just going to go. Okay, so the GRFP supports certain disciplines, and your discipline may be a sub-discipline within the list here, but basically the sciences, engineering, life sciences, materials science, materials research, math, physics, psychology, the social sciences, as well as engineering and mathematics-based STEM education can be funded through the GRFP program. There are things that are specifically not funded by the NSF, and that is business, administration, medical, dental, public health, joint science professional degree programs, and education unless it's specifically STEM education. If you are unsure about whether or not your discipline actually falls under the umbrella of those that are considered by the GRFP program, I would recommend reaching out to the program manager in the field that is closest to yours and inquire there, because they would have the best answer for you.
Just jump in, Abby. Also, the other person to talk to is if you have a mentor or advisor in a similar area at NSU. Some of them are working in the medical field, but they have a way of proposing their work to NSF for biomedical reasons. So you just would talk to them in terms of how to frame it so that it is actually eligible. And they would also have input on that. Very good point. Just some general eligibility. This is restricted to U.S. citizens, nationals, and permanent residents. It's to fund early career students, so there is an emphasis on students who are either undergraduates now, applying to graduate school for next fall, or students who are in their first or second year of graduate school. There are some exceptions for students who are in their third year of graduate school, but there are some specifics to those in the program solicitation that require a break in education, and you can't have received a graduate degree prior to applying. You do need to be enrolled in a U.S. accredited institution by next fall. There are some application limits I want to let you know about. For undergraduate students and students who have not taken graduate courses yet, there is no limit. So as long as you're an undergraduate or haven't enrolled in graduate school yet, you can apply, get feedback, and apply again, maybe as a graduate student, or maybe you go out and work for a company and then decide you want to go back to graduate school, and you could also apply again as well. In graduate school, it gets a little bit more complicated. You're only allowed one application from the time that you start as a graduate student. And it must be, again, in your first or second year, with very few exceptions for third-year students. So you have to pick, if you're a first-year student, is this going to be the year that you apply, or do you want to wait until the next year? Maybe you feel like, oh, I just want to get this paper out, or do something, and maybe my application would be even better next year. It's a tough decision, a tough call to make in some cases, but I would recommend talking with your research advisor, and I would certainly be happy to talk to you to think about whether or not this would be a good year, or if next year would be the one that would be the year that you would apply. The key elements to this award are 3 years of stipend support, as well as educational allowance to cover tuition. And this can be spread out as over 5 years. So you can apply, maybe you can use it for your first year,
maybe you have to do a mandatory TA in your department, and then you could do another 2 years. And perhaps your PI might have some funding during that time, and it would be more advantageous for you to be on that. So there's some wiggle room with how you can spread that out over the 5 years. The application is open now. So thinking about this right now is the right time. The deadlines are late October, and they vary depending on your discipline. So you'll want to check the program solicitation for your specific discipline to see when those deadlines are. The awards are announced at the end of March generally, or very early April. So the time is now to get writing, utilize your resources with the Writing Center, your friends, your advisor for feedback, and get an application submitted. So Sarah will go into some of the criteria for reviewing the complete application, but it contains 3 primary elements. It will have a personal relevant background and future goals statement. And this is where you can talk about your personal story, your research experience, and your future goals as a professional within the field of science. This is about 3 pages. Probably a lot of you have already written the foundations of this when you applied to graduate school. So if you want to use that as a starting point, that's not a bad idea. And then a graduate research statement, which is essentially a research proposal that is pared down to 2 pages that's going to describe what you're going to do in your time as a graduate student. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the fact that you aren't necessarily committing to do what you are saying you're going to do in your research statement. It may very well be what you intend to do for your graduate work, but that's not what NSF is going to be looking at. The reviewers are going to be looking at whether or not you can independently plan and carry out research. And so the research statement is going to be looking at, can you plan research? There are also going to be transcripts that are uploaded into FastLane, and then 3 letters of reference that can speak to the various elements in your personal statement. So the solicitation is available on the NSF website. There's FAQs and links, and the program managers are also available to answer any specific questions that you might have. Sarah is going to start talking about the review criteria, and these are the same criteria that if we write a proposal to NSF, we are also judged on these 2 criteria, and those are, oops, I went the wrong way, intellectual merit and broader impacts. And intellectual merit is the potential to advance knowledge. Broader impacts encompasses the potential to benefit society and contribute to desired societal outcomes. And so she'll touch on those as they pertain to the GRFP.
Okay, and so what it's important to keep in mind is that you should talk about intellectual merit and broader impacts in both your personal statement and in your research plan. And in fact, many good proposals, and the students who are going to talk later to you can tell you whether they did this or not, many good proposals that we saw would actually have specific titles that help the reviewer read what were you considered intellectual merit and what you considered broader impacts, to kind of guide them, because that as a reviewer, you're scanning the documents to try and find that information. So you can see here that the idea is here that you want to consider intellectual merit, and so there are some specific examples of things that they give you in terms of what they might be, but they may be the ability of use, so things like your own scholarships, your own how likely it is for that research to be undertaken and be successful is what would come in here. So that would be the quality of the institution, the quality of you yourself, and the quality of other resources available to you. And then the broader impacts is often where reviewers are looking for evidence that you have already in your life tried to impact by mentoring other people, by being involved in outreach, by putting together a proposal that is going to influence society in some way. And so So you can see some of those things are listed out down here. You know, is the plan for carrying out the proposed activities well reasoned? Is how qualified is your team? And are there adequate resources? So it can be good to mention, you know, you wouldn't propose studying nuclear energy at MSU and expect to get funded. You would want to, and you wouldn't expect the reviewer to necessarily know that the institution you've chosen has the best centre for biofilm engineering in the country. So if you're going to propose something really topical like studying biofilms at MSU, then you would want to identify in your proposal the fact that those are excellent resources or that there's an excellent mentor available or something like that. I think you can go on, Abby. I don't think can I control it? No. So intellectual merit and broader impacts assessment comes in all of these places. So your personal relevant background and future goals statement will include aspects that touch on intellectual merit and broader impact. So like I said, the intellectual merit part, and that might be evidence of your own quality leading up till now, evidence that you can write, evidence that you can present, evidence that you can be a scholar, and then the graduate research statement, for instance, that would be where you might identify that the research you're doing has got good resource support and good mentorship support at the university. And then your reference letters, and this we'll talk about a little more, but we have to keep emphasizing that the reference letters is the third critical component of your application, and you need to work with your references to make sure that they refer to everything that you refer to and basically back it up, because anyone can write a great statement, but a reviewer will say, wow, I wonder where the evidence is that this person actually did all these, has changed the world. And if they see in at least one of your reference letters confirmation of everything that you mentioned, they're going to give full credit to your personal statement.
And I would say another thing that is also good about getting those key things into your reference letters is it helps the information stand out to the reviewers. Reviewers are going to be reading about 30 of these applications, and so hearing about the same thing in the same application two, sometimes 3 times really helps them not miss anything that you feel is important.
Yeah, and on that same note, I mean, you'll hear what the other students did, and Erin will give you help as well, but I like, when I'm reviewing these, I like it when really what I'm looking for is a list of bullet points, but of course you're submitting essays and well-written documents. But when you write it, you should think about the fact that what both these essays really contain is bullet points. And you're expanding each of those bullet points into a paragraph or a sentence. And if they all merge together and you mix all the bullet points up, then it's going to make it really hard for the reviewer to glean out the important bullet points that they're trying to use to review your material. So I think next one, Abby. So this is sort of getting into a bit of the nitty-gritty on intellectual merit, but you can see it's the potential of the applicant to advance knowledge and so this includes the strength of your academic record. So if you're someone who has a poor academic record and has no evidence of any writing or oral presentations, it would be valid for a reviewer to wonder whether you have the potential to advance knowledge. So anything that you've done that indicates that you're a great applicant to succeed at graduate school. Remember, just getting A's isn't necessarily going to make you successful at graduate school, but showing perseverance when adversity strikes, that's evidence that you're going to be successful at graduate school. Stepping outside your comfort zone, taking on hard challenges, learning to self-study, those are the sorts of things that you can speak to. So even if you think, oh, I haven't got this perfect record, it's about the story that you tell. And so if you think you've done something that demonstrates it, say what you've done, but then indicate why you think that gives you the potential to advance knowledge and be successful at graduate school. So, back one. Yes, there are. So again, one.
Back one more.
Yeah, one more. That one with academic record on it.
Sorry.
That's all right. I can speak to it anyway. So basically, intellectual merit is academic performance, your research plan, an appropriate choice of institution, and then what your references say about you as well. So you want and any research experience at all. And this doesn't mean that you had to have officially had a research experience for undergrads, or that you have to be well into your research as a graduate student. Research experience, once we had a student who was in a wheelchair, and her research experience, she talked about having to research technologies to assist her in adapting to life in a wheelchair. So there are sort of all sorts of creative ways to demonstrate how you've had research experience in your life, even if you think you haven't had the classic experiences with internships and research experience at graduate school. So broader impacts is the next topic, and this here is the potential for future broader impacts as indicated by your experiences. So that again, if you're going to claim that you're going to change the world, and yet there's nothing that you talk about in your essay that indicates that you've tried to change the world so far, then that would be doubt for a reviewer. So you've got to really work hard to think about any evidence that demonstrates that you do care about society and about impacting the future for the better, and work out about how to work those bullet points into your essay. And then, of course, you should have a section in your research statement. Would be very normal to have a section titled Broader Impacts, and it's even normal to put in your research plan that one of your plans is to get involved with mentoring undergraduate researchers in your proposal as well. So having some aspect of your research proposal that includes a little bit of outreach or some mentorship of some undergraduates can be a good way, as well as the broader impact of the actual research plan itself can be a good way to include that. So all of this comes together in your personal and relevant background and future goals statement. So it's 3 pages. Got that slide, Abby? One. Oh, yeah, sure. So this is the broader impacts that we talked about. So this is the specifics, sort of what you plan to do, as well as evidence of stuff previously, individual experiences. So for instance, if you are someone who's experienced adversity or had trouble accessing higher education, then bringing that story or felt at a disadvantage in any way, then that's an individual experience. So for instance, as an example, being a woman in science, if I shouldn't expect the reviewer to just say, oh, she's a woman in science, she's going to be a role model for women. I should make a statement in there that I had a certain experience as a woman in science, and I therefore want to be a role model, give back in a certain way, contribute in other ways, be involved in certain organizations. So I shouldn't just put it on the reviewer to think, oh, because I'm from some group that I'm going to therefore help advance that group. And then, of course, the other things in terms of reaching diverse audiences and benefits to society. So then all of this comes.
And I would say just one place where I've seen students have missteps on their applications is sometimes they'll talk all about their prior accomplishments and then not indicate what their future plans are. And so the reviewer is just left to speculate that maybe they'll carry on, work in this area, but I would caution you to make it very clear that you do have future plans, both demonstrated prior accomplishments or experiences, and then how those will translate into your future plans.
So what we've done so far is tell you some background about the information, eligibility, etc. Talk about this idea of intellectual merit and broader impacts that have to weave continually through all 3 of your major documents. And now we just want to touch on those 3 documents. So I'll start with the personal, relevant background and future goals statement. So this is a 3-page statement, and it should encompass your own personal, what used to be called your personal statement, but also a paragraph on each of your critical experiences. So there's a lot of information here that you can read through. But again, I like to think of this as being something that you sit down, first of all, and list all the bullet points you want to talk about. Your research experience in someone's lab, your some travel you did abroad, a community group that you worked with, a personal experience that changed you or was impacting your future. And then think of writing your essay so that each paragraph documents what you did and why, again, always bringing it back to why this will make you a talented and successful scientific researcher that will complete graduate school and go on to contribute to society. All right, so you want to keep continuing to make sure you complete those circles on each of those paragraphs. Abby, did you want to add anything, or did you want to talk about this one? Yeah.
Yeah, just on your personal statement, how you write it is up to you. Some people talk about an experience that they had in the first few paragraphs. Some people go very chronologically through their academic history, but I would try to have some sort of common thread, whether it be tools that you've learned in each of your research or personal experiences that you're going to bring forward into your research plan or your future goals as a professional. Try to make it cohesive and go together. And also, don't be afraid to make things very, very obvious about the things that demonstrate intellectual merit. You could even put a bold heading in your statement, as well as a bold heading for things that would fall under the broader impacts criterion. Because again, the reviewers are looking at a lot of these applications and helping them find the information that they need to evaluate the proposal is equally important to telling your story. So there's some technique to this. Don't be afraid to bold a couple of things. Maybe you presented at a conference and won an award and you want to highlight that. Don't be afraid to make that stand out. As far as your research plan, this is your chance to show that you have the ability to plan an original research topic that you would like to pursue in graduate school. And the NSF is not going to hold your feet to the fire and check in to make sure you've done that. What you're providing to the reviewers is evidence that you are capable of planning and executing a research plan. The executing part would be the skills you've learned up until this point, and whether or not that you have considered and have access to the resources that you need to carry out your plan. I have found that the very compelling and strong research plans focus a little bit, maybe a paragraph or so, on why the research is important, but they really get into what is going to be done, and they're hypothesis-driven experiment. And this is not going to cover a short amount of time. This is going to be something that you would work on for perhaps 3 years. So that makes it really challenging to get all of that information into 2 pages, but it's the parameters that everybody is working within. Make sure to include correct citations. There are some creative ways that you can cite things so that they don't take up too much room. You could look at some examples in different journals so that your citations are short and to the point. They still give credit to the authors, and people could look up the work if they needed to, but they're not consuming, let's say, half a page of your 2 pages. This needs to be original. It's important that it makes sense for the school that you're proposing to go to or the lab that you're currently working in, but it needs to be your own idea. And that's something that's also really important. You don't want someone to read it and think, oh, this is basically what their mentor or PI told them to do. It should be pretty clear that this is your own idea and that you have planned all of the experiments yourselves. Do you have anything to add here, Sarah?
Yeah, I think what I was going to add was going to come into the reference letter section, but I think one thing is sometimes you get conflicting information, and it's true because honestly reviewers have conflicting priorities when they're reviewing. Some say, I mean, I've heard reviewers say, oh, this proposal is exactly what they're doing, a continuation from their undergraduate research, so there's no creativity shown there. And then I've heard other reviewers say, oh, this research proposal is completely different from their undergraduate research, so where's the evidence that they're capable of making this transition? So whichever route you go, try to give a justification for why, either re-emphasize why your undergraduate experience is exactly what you needed to stick in the same direction and how made you passionate about things, or say why you're prepared to make a dramatic transition to a different topic. Just sort of make sure you've got that in there. And that also ties into the reference letters, because the references are where you can get a lot of validation of what you're proposing and what you're claiming as well. So did you want to click to that one, Abby?
Yeah. So the reference letters, these, you can have up to 5 people designated to be a reference letter writer. And the reason for that is because we really want you to have 3. And I believe you can prioritize which ones would be your top 3. What's happened in the past and why they're allowing 5 to submit letters is because sometimes there are faculty who haven't turned in the letter on time, even though the student has sent, cordial reminders and given them plenty of time and information to complete the letter. That's certainly something that you want to do. Certainly, if you can ask the individual in person or through, it's kind of hard to do that in some cases right now in the current environment, but certainly reach out and give us ample time to prepare the letters. They should be able to corroborate elements of either your scientific background or your personal background, and definitely share your application materials with them. It doesn't have to be the final draft. It could be a draft that you're just work in progress, but it definitely will help them provide a more accurate letter if they have some ideas about your background as well as what you're planning to do in your graduate career. Encourage your letter writers to address the intellectual merit and broader impacts criteria that we've been talking about going into your application. So they should also highlight those 2 things in their letters as well. So a complete application will have 3 letters. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, so one thing that you need to keep in mind is that you may have chosen the best person in your field to work with, a really well-established and fabulous advisor, but reviewers aren't necessarily going to know that. And so we've often encouraged, if that is the case, we've encouraged one of the other or encouraged the student to ask one of the other reference writers to actually specifically give credit to the person that you've chosen to work with as an advisor. Because as you can imagine, your advisor is going to say you are absolutely wonderful because they want you to get this funding, because it's going to give you a lot of money and it's going to give you a lot of flexibility and it's going to save their research grants. And so a lot of reviewers won't give as much credit to a really positive reference letter from your advisor. So making sure your other 2 letters really refer to your strengths and your advisor's strengths, and the pairing together, etc., can be a really powerful thing to have there. And again, you should send your reference letters, your reference writers, your research proposal and your essay. And you should bullet point the things that you would like each of your reference writers to comment on about you. And that can mean feeling pretty, being a little less humble than you normally are. You just need to really sell yourself to remind them what it is that you're selling about yourself. Okay, well, I can do this one. So preparing a competitive application, you want to read it carefully. You've given you a head start here, but it's up to you to read the entire solicitation and to really address these 2 criterias. And then the next thing is really, there's a step in there, check for spelling and grammatical errors, which really should say, go through the writing center, go to your mentors, go to your friends, go to as many people as you can, because I'm sure you're going to hear this message from many of the students. Some of them might have got lucky, but most students that get this spend an incredible amount of time perfecting their essays and their research statements by getting input from others. And then, you also want to, in those reference letters, it's going to be really good to have your advisor confirm, especially if you're working on a topic, confirm that something about this was your own original work. You definitely want to remind your reference letters not to write, they gave me something and I gave them a lot of help with it and it's turned out really good. Okay, I've actually seen that in reference letters, and it's like, no, even if they did give you a lot of help, they cannot refer to that in your reference letter. And then there's some other details down there about eligibility and criteria.
And I put a link to the current solicitation in the chat. So the people who are evaluating your application are, let's say, a chemical engineer if you're applying to the chemical engineering directorate, but they may or may not be very familiar with your particular research field. So keep that in mind. There's a lot of breadth within a lot of disciplines, and the person who is reading your application may not be as familiar with the specifics of the science. So keep that in mind when you're writing. Also, panelists have to write a summary of what they feel the broader impacts are. So there's actually a web interface, and we have a place where we write what are the broader impacts of this application. And we do the same thing for intellectual merit. And we actually score those separately, but we're encouraged to weight them evenly, although some people might weight one a little bit more than the other. Each person has their own reviewing schema that they use. You will get read by 3 different people, so there are multiple people reading your application, and their reviews go in aggregate, and then there's a panel discussion of the top proposals. We're supposed to provide constructive comments. Unfortunately, not all panelists do, but I think most do make a good faith effort to provide constructive feedback, especially to the undergraduate students who do have the opportunity to apply again. Unfortunately for the graduate students, you do only get one chance, but there are other fellowship opportunities out there. So if there is constructive feedback, it could be used for different fellowship applications. We make recommendations to the NSF, and the panel concludes. And then NSF actually makes their own decisions. They take the panel recommendations very seriously, but there is some shuffling. They look for geographic diversity. They don't, so that people from Montana are represented, for example, in the winnings. So there are some things that happen after the reviewers conclude the panel. And then NSF awards the fellowships and honorable mentions. And it is a competitive application process. So for students who get honorable mentions, that's actually a really, really wonderful accomplishment. And I don't think you should feel disappointed with an honorable mention. I think it's, you're in the top 20% in that case of really top students to begin with. In 2019, there were 1,600 awards, and I believe that it's going to be the same number this year. Besides just getting constructive feedback, this is great preparation for writing your grad school applications if you're an undergrad. And as I mentioned earlier, some of these proposals can be recycled if they're not successful into other fellowship competitions. Do you have anything to add, Sarah?
No, I think we've covered most things.
I think that's all we have for our overview. I haven't been watching the chat incredibly carefully. I don't know if there are questions there, but you're welcome to ask us some questions at this time.
Well, let me thank Sarah and Abby, and then open it up for questions, and then we'll turn to the student panel.
I have a question. It's specific really to first-year grad students. Is it more important to, like, of the 3 references, one or 2 from grad school and 1 from undergrad, or the other way around? Because obviously people, like, our advisors haven't known us that long, or people in grad school haven't known us that long.
I think the you definitely, it would be a red flag if your advisor didn't write a letter. So you would definitely have your advisor, and then of course having one from the undergrad institution to speak to any experiences you're discussing at undergraduate would be critical as well. But the third one could, I would say, should be used to balance things. If you've already got into your research project and you've got someone else who can really confirm like I said before, you know, the quality of your advisor, the quality of your research so far, the meaningfulness of something you've done, like how meaningful some experiment was that you conducted, or how meaningful a conference that you managed to present at was, then you would have a graduate school one. On the other hand, you wouldn't just put a graduate in there, a person from graduate school that didn't know you as well if most of your application was leaning heavily towards, so it's about your evidence of being successful. Is it coming from undergraduate experiences or what you're doing right now in graduate school? And that might depend on whether you're a first or a second year graduate student. And also, if you've been involved in a number of things as an undergraduate, you can tell the person that you're asking. So someone could ask me to write a letter, and even though I'm not involved in Engineers Without Borders, they could ask me, can you please confirm or include a statement even from the Engineers Without Borders advisor confirming this aspect, so that so that I'm the reference writer confirming all of the experiences, even the ones that I'm not directly involved in.
So there was a question about the focus on this year's emphasis from Brady.
I see that. I would say as long as what you are planning fits into the NSF guidelines, I would go ahead and apply for whatever is best suited to your skill set. I don't know, they don't tell the reviewers to focus on something in particular in terms of give a priority to this research area over that one. I do not know if that happens within NSF after the panel concludes, though, but I haven't heard of that. Have you, Sarah?
No, I haven't. And also, it sounds like the topics that you put up there would be specific to a certain field. So it's true that reviewers in that field might be aware that those are, that would be your demonstration. You want to choose something that's topical. Again, that's putting together a good research project. Your advisors and mentors here at MSU know that certain topics people just aren't interested in funding. So the reviewers are aware of that too. If it's something they think is going to have a lot of benefit to society, is relevant right now, then those are the sorts of topics that they're looking for. If it's a topic that isn't really funding agencies aren't that interested in funding, then they might be a little bit more negative about that topic.
I think what Brady might be referring to is the NSF put out an announcement that said something about putting emphasis on those 3 focus areas, and that was new this year. So I don't know if it's something that those are very specific areas. So if your research is not related to those at all, it'd be really difficult to put quantum information or see how much I know about it as a microbiologist, but I think those specifically popped up in some news announcement that I saw.
Yeah, I agree with that, Isaac. Certainly, and Sarah was alluding to this, if this is within your field, that may be a good area to pursue, particularly if your prior experiences would poise you to do well in those areas, and it would show that you're aware of where the research is going and what's most current. But I don't think a microbiologist should write a proposal about that.
If in doubt, send an email to the program officer in your area and ask. Right, program officers are pretty comfortable at this point of the year answering questions.
Evan, you have a question. Do you want to go ahead?
Evan, you're on mute.
Just a question regarding reference letters. So if you do have 5 really good references and you see all 5 get submitted, how do you go about maybe whittling it down to 3, or is there a way to even do that on your side?
I haven't actually seen the interface because I have not applied, but my understanding, and maybe some of the previous applicants can mention what they did. I think you prioritize which ones you would like to be 1, 2, and 3. And then if, let's say, 2 doesn't get their letter in on time, then 4 would move into the place of 2.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am watching the time. I don't know if our student panel has the ability to stay on for another 10 or so minutes, but if so, I think that might be a useful thing to try to do. I understand that we sort of said this could be an hour, so that goes to 6:10. So hopefully people's flexibility.
I tried to make it an hour and a half, Craig.
Oh, hour and a half.
But people do have lives, so I don't know.
Okay. Oh, good. We have.
I'm free for an hour and a half, so I can stay.
Okay, good. Thank you. See what little I know. I should watch my calendar. So many of my meetings these days are an hour, right? Well, then we've got more time for any questions for Abby or Sarah, or we go straight to the panel.
My thought is, Craig, they should hear from the students
Okay.
and then see if they've got questions, and we can always jump in. But I think at this point, students are going to know a lot more than us.
Okay, well, let's do that. Now I realize we've got a little bit more time. I thought I would perhaps moderate. We have 4 students. I don't know, I haven't checked to see if all 4 are on, but Isaac Miller, Jessica Eggers, Mariah Romero, and Rita Claire are all 4 current holders, or I think Rita's postponed for a year. So thank you for joining us. What I thought I would do is split the discussion in 2 and ask to start with if any one of the 4 of you have advice on the first part of the application, the personal statement. And then we'll go after that to advice on the second half of the application, which is the research plan. And so who would like to start on advice that you might have found useful for the first half, the personal statement? And any 4 of you can start.
Okay, I can start. I started writing that first part of the application without a real good idea of what was expected of it. And it's kind of difficult to write about yourself and to like, I thought I've sort of had a boring life. So it was really hard to find some sort of adversity to pull from. And if you go onto the NSF website, there were videos at that time, tutorials that really walk you through like what they're looking for in that section. And I would say I found that section to be more difficult than the scientific part because it's more of a narrative rather than scientific writing. So definitely give it a lot of time and make sure that it's well written. But that would just be my advice.
I guess I can go next. I wrote mine in the fall of 2018, and I was also a little bit confused about what I thought the right structure would be for it. And I kind of read through, I linked Alex Lang's website, and he has a bunch of different examples from all years and all disciplines, and that was really helpful for me to go through. But I wrote mine kind of like personal statement that was like 3/4 page. The background intellectual merit, which is kind of just like talking through your CV and resume in like a more eloquent way. And then the last part of broader impact. So I saw a lot of different versions of how people wrote this, but like that was like the easiest way for me to write it and try and have it sectioned well and flow well.
Yeah, so what I found really helpful was also that Alexander website, and students in my department, while I was at a different university, the older graduate students, those who did receive the NSF GRFP, they were willing to share their proposals. And so within your department, definitely reach out, but also in the website too. I found it really helpful to look at each section and see what words were highlighted or was a full sentence highlighted, because the reviewers have so many proposals that they're going over. And so when they see a highlighted sentence, that could definitely attract their eye. And so I definitely recommend looking at the website for, were the last 2 sentences bolded, or were certain words bolded throughout your proposal. So that's just something to keep in mind, is definitely utilize that website that's available.
Don't write it in all caps, though.
Yeah, don't do that.
I would say my advice would be that you should not worry so much. Like if you feel like you don't have adversity in your past, or if you like don't feel like you have a unique story, It's okay. I think that the most important thing, at least in my case, was just writing about something that you're passionate about and how it could connect to your research. And basically just showing that you're passionate about something. I think that is really helpful.
Yeah. And don't forget the readers are people like Abby, Sarah, and myself who, just have our own stories. So we know that something happened in our life that got us interested. So just know that the person behind, the application is going to be, looking for that arc. That means that this is a big part of who you are. I mean, you haven't gone to graduate school because it was the next thing to do. You've gone to graduate school because this is a compelling part of your life. And that you almost had to go to graduate school. You had to do this research in some ways. Questions from the students. It can be on anything, but perhaps we could focus on this first section of the this first document. See people clicking off. I don't see questions. All right, let me perhaps go on to the second half of the application, which is the research plan. Any advice or tips or strategies for the research plan?
I think one I think maybe important idea is to try to pick something that has like a collaborative element to it, so that you're doing research that maybe spans in not just like I chose something that was in microbiology, but also had some animal science aspects. Just to keep that in mind, if you can do something like that and utilize the resources at the university that you're thinking of going to, I think that could be important. When it comes to writing this, I think just be as succinct as possible, and be really clear with your research questions and hypotheses, and highlight each of your objectives or bold them or put them in italics or something like that, so that it's very clear that maybe as the reviewer reads to the bottom of the page, they can look up and say, okay, what are we talking about, and be drawn directly back to the objective. And then for an idea for getting the references in there, because 2 pages is really, I was writing about 5 years of research in 2 pages, which is really crazy to me. And so I just threw in the references in really short form in the footer of the page, and that worked for me.
Others.
Yeah, I did the same thing as I did. I showed all my references in the footer because I wanted all that room. Getting it down to 2 pages and having it both be like to the point, but also detailed enough that it was clear that I knew what I was doing for the research. I just other things to add, because I think you said a lot. Don't be afraid to put some sort of like figure in there if you really think it helps explain like the design of your experiment. That's really helpful. I put a table in. I looked at a lot of examples again of all different fields, and I think that was helpful, especially people reviewing yours won't be experts in your field, which is something to keep in mind.
So I see Benaz added something to the chat that headers and footers have been banned. So that needs to be checked, and we'll try to make sure that either before the end of this webinar, we'll get it on record. I see Abby's furiously searching.
I just Googled in the program solicitation, which I can encourage all of you to read, and it says 1-inch margins on all sides, no text inside the 1-inch margin, so no header, footer, name, or page number. And I have heard of people getting sent back without review for having just a line of their references go onto a third page on their program or their research proposal, so they are pretty serious about it.
Yeah.
I think one other thing that Abby and Sarah probably mentioned, that make sure that you're including your broader impacts in both of your statements. That's really critical to like tie that back in. And I think that I talked in my research proposal as well about the opportunities for outreach, and not everything in the research proposal should just be like, here's the experiments I'm going to be doing.
There was a question in the chat from Gretchen.
I think it helps to have a university selected that makes sense for the type of research that you're trying to do. So if you want to do a PhD related to microbiology and there's no one in your proposed institution doing anything with microbiology, then that wouldn't be a good choice. You're not specifically beholden to go to any of the universities that you pick as an undergraduate student. It's selecting one that seems to be a good place for you to do the research that you're proposing. And the reviewers do understand that undergrads may not have even applied to these universities yet.
And you should also identify, I've seen proposals where they would say maybe I've identified several researchers to work with at this institution. You don't even have to have contacted them. You could, if you were really planning to go work with them, you could do that. But I think you definitely should, or at least you should say something like, this research plan will be conducted at one of the following institutions that the applicant is planning to apply to, something like that.
All right, let me do what I did last time, which is ask if there are any questions for the student panelists on this section, the second section of the application. There was a question from Andrew.
I think it's definitely okay to have different headings if you want in your personal statement. I do want to say that you are almost basically required to specifically address intellectual merit and broader impact. So those are important headings to have somewhere. But I've seen students do that in a variety of ways. Some have saved it all for one section. I've seen other people sprinkle in intellectual merit and broader impacts into each individual experience. So I would say it depends on your personal style, but make sure that both of those review criteria are identified in your proposal and personal statement.
I would also add that NSF do change things every year, and we've tried to catch a few of those, and the students here have recent information too. But just remember, it's on you to read new solicitation information, because it may be that there's a line in there that says you must use these exact templates. Probably not, but just keep in mind that it's up to you to really read the solicitation and make sure there's that we haven't miscommunicated something, because, for instance, a few years ago they changed it from 3 essays to 2 essays and merged them all, and so they do make some quite big changes sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And I put the solicitation link back in the chat. So I would save that, because there are some older solicitations out there for previous competitions. The 2019, 18 are findable in a Google search. So make sure that you use the one for the 2020 competition. And you'll see the specific dates for each discipline for due dates in October 2020. So that'll let you know that you've got the right one.
And another trick, if you want to call it, is for that 2-page research statement that everybody's saying is really short. You may not need to waste a line on a bolded intro section header, right? Because if it's the first paragraph, it's quite clearly going to be an intro, right? And then you should have a separate, bolded header for intellectual merit and broader impacts. So I think those two need to be perhaps highlighted and explicitly written, but perhaps you can get away with not needing to write out introduction ahead of that first paragraph, because it's pretty obvious it's an introduction. Not that I've ever tried to squeeze a lot of content into a limited space ever in my life. One of the things that Abby said a few minutes ago is worthwhile making sure that really does get emphasized. Things do get returned without review, right? So if you violate line spacings, font sizes, page margins, it could get returned.
Evan, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I had a question regarding just kind of like previous work experience / laboratory experience. Just have some experience in national labs that I've worked in before, and a lot of the stuff that I worked on wasn't publishable or is like government use only. So I was just wondering how maybe you would address that, saying you have a year or two of experience in a lab setting, but it's hard to can't really distinguish what you can say about what you did, I guess.
So I'll jump in because I actually am coming from a national lab as well. I worked at NREL for 2 years, and they came out of it with currently no publications, and that didn't really. You don't have to have research that is published, and in terms of like what you're allowed to disclose, I guess that's up to whoever you were working with at the lab, but I think that you don't even have to get that much in detail about it. You could just say, I did a lot of cloning and, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah,
I would focus on exactly what Rita said as far as the skills that you learned. Perhaps you learned leadership skills, different lab techniques. How are those going to weave into your proposed research?
Okay.
Is what you can take from that experience.
Yeah,
thank you.
And certainly you should feel comfortable at mentioning where you got that experience from, right? And most reviewers will realize that now you're restricted to describing those skills and those experiences rather than the results.
Awesome, thank you.
I think Daniel wrote a question on the chat.
I don't see that as being a negative. I think it's important that your proposal needs to be different from that funding, to your second question. And so I think you could address maybe how it is complementary if you want to continue in that area of research, but you should very clearly say how it is different from what your PI had proposed. And that would show your intellectual contribution to that particular project and how you're going to take it in another very different direction that perhaps it was out of the scope of your PI's research proposal, or perhaps your PI never even came up with the idea. So I think there are some ways that you can do that.
And your PI will be able to help you with that as well. you don't have to refer to the fact that they've got a fully funded project. You just would talk about your current experience and how that prepares you for what you're doing as a research proposer. I mean, what you wouldn't want is for your advisor to write, I gave them my proposal and they adapted this from my proposal, you know. So I think your advisor will be able to sort of talk about the significance of what you're proposing, and yeah. So I don't think that really needs to even come up to some extent.
So that was going to be my question, is that Daniel, in principle, doesn't need to even write about what the advisor's funding is for. So what you're saying, Sarah?
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, I don't think you would say, yeah, I mean, you could propose definitely what you're basically doing with your advisor, but putting it in your own words with your own direction and your own and the thing is, if you got that funding, it would give you flexibility to not do exactly what your advisor needs you to do. And then, like I said, it's up to your advisor to also, they're the only ones who would write something like, oh, I just got funded on this project and now this person's extending it. I think your advisor needs to be more supportive of your own direction and creativity when they write their reference letter. So yeah, it shouldn't come up.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, let me do one last poll of the student panel. Any final tips or advice you might have? Could be on anything.
Evan, is your hand up from before? Do you have another question?
No, just before.
Okay, cool.
I guess some advice that's a little different from what we've heard is it can be sometimes overwhelming to get too many inputs on your proposal as you're writing it. So if you send it out to like 10 people and they all pull you in different directions, that can be kind of challenging. So I'd pick a few and stick with that rather than having a bunch. And also, I'll put my email in the chat, but I'm happy to share my proposal with anyone who wants it, and also unsuccessful proposals that I've written, so you can take a look at maybe some differences.
I think my personal ratio at the moment is about 5 or 6 to 1 for unsuccessful proposals to successful proposals, just to be completely transparent to everybody in the room.
And I'll just say, you shouldn't, these are all fabulous students that have got these awards, but so it can be tempting to sort of listen to their stories or read their essays if they share them with you and think that you are not worthy of this and so not to do it. And I can just tell you that's completely not true. Apart from the fact that doing this will provide you with material that you'll use for other applications and other situations, you've got to be in to win. And honestly, I've mentored some students in the past where I've thought, oh, I don't think this is a really strong story, and the reviewer that hit on it loved it and they got funded. So I think you've got to realize that don't be put off by thinking, oh, you're not good enough to apply for this. I really think it's an exercise that all graduate students should aim to go through.
And we all suffer from the imposter syndrome. So.
Yeah, on that note, I actually I think I read maybe 2 other example applications, and then I was like, I can't do this. I'm just feeling too insecure and comparing myself to these people too much. And so I just didn't read anybody else's applications after that. I think that if you get too in depth and try and pick apart what other people did right, you're going to get too caught up in that. And I think that the really important thing is to just find your own voice and find something that makes you stand out as a person. And one of the best pieces of advice that I got was that NSF it's picking people, it's not picking projects, and that pretty much everybody who's applying has an interesting research proposal, and the real decision making happens on the level of who are you as a person. And so I'd say just get in touch with what makes you unique and how you can bring your unique skill set and outlook in life to your research.
I thought that was awesome, Rita. That is 100% what this is about. And I hope that that inspires all of you to go tell your story about how you found your way to science and write your NSF GRFP proposal.
Mariah, do you have any last words? I know I haven't called on you for a while, or you haven't said anything recently. You want to add anything?
Dr. Ogilvy, I'm sorry, did you address me? My dog was having a nasal issue right now, so I stepped away from the computer.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I was including you because, you know, the other three panelists were, you know, well, you're all amazing, but I just want to make sure that you had a chance to say if you had any last words of advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so sorry I had to step away. But I just want to emphasize, don't be afraid to put yourself out there because, you know, you'd be amazed at how many students have a very similar story that you have and challenges that you've overcame. I met one of my good friends in grad school because like I asked them to read over my proposal and I put myself out there like that. And they're like, oh my gosh, you know, I've struggled with something similar. And so we were able to bond over that. But with her also reading over my proposal, she was able to give me really good feedback. And, you know, it's okay to ask friends, you know, who do know your story to read over your proposal. But also I just want to emphasize, don't be afraid to put yourself out there when you're writing these proposals and your personal statements.
Well, thank you, and I do hope your dog is okay.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
The realities of WebEx scores. Well, look, I think that may be, you know, time to wrap it up. So I want to first thank the panelists, Isaac, Jessica, Mariah, and Rita. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and your wisdom. Then let me go back up to Abby and Sarah. That's really is just great for your service that you've done for the panel, but then to share that back to these students is just so appreciated. I know Erin had to leave, but I want to thank her and Kathy, my colleague, for putting this together is also much appreciated. So I wish you well. I mean, there's lots of resources. We'll save the chat so you have some of the questions and links, and we'll put the chat and the a video recording on a public website and send that out to you so you can sort of see it. Okay. Good. Thank you, Kathy. Do you want to stay on so we can make sure that we get the technical details of saving everything? Thanks, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
These stinks. All right. So
Okay.
I think you can save the chat as host. I don't think I can. So do you want to stop recording?
Okay, I stopped recording.
It says it's still recording.